This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
Good morning. Thanks to all of you for your presence in this very interesting and important seminar. My special thanks to Luis and AB Colombia for organizing this conversation about the future of mining in Colombia and its impact on the indigenous communities, other fragile communities, and the environment. I welcome my fellow citizens, Alex and Argemiro, and I will certainly take note of their claims and their problems to make sure that the Colombian government response to their needs and to their problems is more effective than it has been up to now. Before I explain to you how our government sees the present and future of mining in Colombia, and in particular its relation with the indigenous communities and the environment, let me share with you some basic but important context information. In Colombia, we have 1.4 million members of indigenous communities, distributed in 87 communities with 65 native languages. They represent 3% of the total population of Colombia, but they are very important, of course, for our country. We have 639 indigenous reserves throughout the whole country. Colombia is approximately 4.5 times the size of the UK, so that you have an order of magnitude. And these indigenous reserves represent 31 million hectares. That's a huge amount of land. That's an amount of land equivalent to 27% of our total national territory has been declared as indigenous communities reserve. So approximately 3% of the population have special rights in almost 30% of our territory. This gives you solid evidence of the great importance we give to our indigenous communities. Now, in relation to the environment, we have 257 protected natural areas in 12 million hectares. This is equivalent to 10% of the total national territory. This is more than the aggregate size of the Netherlands, Belgium, and Denmark. And the current government has a goal to increase by 3 million new hectares to these protected environmentally special areas to reach 15.6 million hectares by the end of this administration. And by 2020, we are committed to achieve the Nagoya commitments of having 17% of our territory protected for environmental reasons. Now, a few key data about mining, about the mining industry, the mining sector. Mining is today, and will continue to be in the future, one of the engines of economic growth and prosperity for all Colombians. It is a key source of exports, royalties, and tax income needed to invest in social priorities such as education, health, housing, and utilities for the most deprived communities. The mining sector, and here I don't include oil, gas, nor energy, represents 2.3% of the total GDP, nearly 25% of our total exports, 20% of direct foreign investment, 16% of the total royalties, and it generates approximately 800,000 direct and indirect jobs. The mining sector and the oil, gas, and energy sectors contribute $1.6 billion per year in royalties to our national budget, and nearly 28% of the corporate income tax, money that finances social investment in health, and education and utilities for the most deprived communities. And here I want to stress why mining is important for Colombia. It's not just because we want to give the domestic or foreign company the opportunity to have a good business. Of course, it's not because we want to affect our environment, and of course, it's not because we want to harm our communities. It is because we want to have a source of revenue, a source of income to invest in the social, in the urgent social needs that Colombia needs to satisfy. We still have 4.9 million Colombians living in extreme poverty, and we need to, as soon as possible, generate the resources to get those Colombians out of this unacceptable condition. That's why we want to exploit properly, of course, and respecting human rights, and respecting the indigenous and fragile communities, and respecting the environment, minimizing harm to the environment, producing no harm whatsoever to the fragile communities. But we need to generate resources to invest in social priorities. That's the whole justification. It's not just for the sake of growing faster or having an important mining sector, or giving companies the opportunity to make money. The last point I want to emphasize about the mining sector is that private investment, both domestic and foreign, are very welcome in the mining, oil, gas, and energy sectors in Colombia. We feel that they are partners in this purpose of generating income to satisfy the social needs of the poorest of Colombians. Now, the legal framework. The National Plan for Development 2010-2014, Prosperity for All, states the need to, quote, go forward towards an economically, socially, and environmentally responsible development model that enters the international markets with assets and services of high added value and innovation, end of quote. Again, yes, we want growth, yes, we want development, but always making sure that it is socially and environmentally responsible. In relation to the protection of the ethnic and cultural diversity, Colombia is a multicultural, multi-ethnic nation as defined in the political constitution of 1991. This condition implies recognizing the collective and differential rights to the ethnic groups of the country. In this sense, the ethnic communities in Colombia not only have the individual fundamental rights, but also have the collective fundamental rights, such as the right to ethnic and cultural integration, the common ownership of land, and the right to participate in decisions that may concern them directly through the previous consultation mechanism. The indigenous reserves in Colombia that cover, as I told you, close to 30% of the national territory are inalienable, imprescriptible, and guaranteed against seizure. Another differential right of the ethnic groups is the right to self-determination, the recognition of the autonomy to define their own way of life according to their traditions. These rights imply for the Colombian state that when any development projects in mining, oil, gas, energy, infrastructure are planned and implemented, they must involve the communities that reside in the affected areas with the aim of avoiding harm, minimizing the negative impacts of the projects, and defining any compensation if necessary. This is in the understanding that development projects could affect the individual and collective fundamental rights of the ethnic groups, and that they make an economic, social, environmental, and cultural impact on the communities residing there. Our Constitution establishes that, quote, the exploitation of natural resources in the indigenous territories shall be effected without impairing the cultural, social, and economic integrity of indigenous communities. In decisions adopted with regard to the mentioned exploitation, the government shall encourage the participation of representatives of the communities concerned. That's why, as Danilo and Alex have mentioned, the constitutional court that guarantees the proper observance of the Constitution plays a very important role in protecting these communities and protecting the environment. So Colombia has all the ingredients, the human and natural resources, the laws, the institutions, the political commitment and willingness, plus specific plans to develop a socially and environmentally sound and responsible mining sector. However, in practice, we face many problems. We recognize that. And we face many challenges and obstacles. And like all other nations, we have made mistakes and have learned important lessons for the future. Therefore, we must all, government, private sector, indigenous and other fragile communities, environmental experts, NGOs, our international allies like the British government, we must all work together very hard and with a constructive approach to make sure that our common objectives can materialize. I think that the key here is to have a dialogue and a constructive debate. And I want to very quickly quote Mr. Martin von Hildebrand. He's the director of the Gaia Foundation in Colombia. He has spent more than 40 years helping the Amazonian indigenous communities and also contributing to the conservation of the largest and most important tropical rainforest in the world. He was awarded the Right Livelihood Award, the so-called Alternative Peace Prize, in 1999. Von Hildebrand is always remembered as the advisor of former President Barco, who was responsible for the creation of 13 million hectares of tropical rainforest as conservation areas in Colombia. When asked why he is not fighting against mining in Colombia, he answered, "I prefer to dialogue, to propose solutions, and to agree on rational alternatives." And that's what I think that we should all have in these debates. Final statement, very important, two critical points. In my opinion, the real enemies of the indigenous and other fragile communities in Colombia, the real enemies of the environment in Colombia, are not the mining serious, legally established and responsible companies. The real enemies of the indigenous and fragile communities and the environment are the violent actors and the drug business. Cocaine consumption in Europe and the US is really the worst problem that the indigenous communities, the environment, and the peasants of Colombia are facing because of the violence and contamination that it generates. There is clear and abundant evidence that illegal and violent groups, such as guerrillas, financed by the drug trade, narco-traffickers, and other criminal bands, are involved in Colombia with disastrous consequences for fragile communities in the environmental sector. So Europe and the United States must stop taking cocaine, or should adopt a new paradigm on how to deal with the problem in substitution for the failed and very destructive model of the war against drugs. The government of Colombia, now in relation to the violent actors, the government of Colombia has just started a peace process with the FARC guerrilla, which we hope will end in the next 12 months, the almost half-a-century conflict. If we succeed, this will allow the army and the police force to concentrate their efforts in the fight against illegal mining and other crimes, so that the indigenous communities and the peasants can live safely. And the peace agreement would free financial resources now being spent in fighting the guerrillas to be invested in health, education, and utilities for the poorest Colombians. The government of Colombia, which I represent today, is always open to dialogue with all of those who contribute to our common goal of bringing peace to our country and prosperity to all of our citizens, especially those who are most in need. Thank you very much.